welcome back to the Growing Together podcast with me, Sonny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we talk about everything under the sun related to growth and becoming the very best version of yourself. This week, we're back with another episode after taking last week off for Cesar's birthday weekend. He turned the dirty 30. So
30.
He's no longer in his 20s anymore. R.I.P. to Cesar's 20s.
I was at work and we're talking about like everyone's birthday. Like, man, time just flies. It's insane.
But we went out to, we had a really good day on Cesar's birthday. We went to like a lot of, well, not a lot, like two of the Nashville breweries. I think one was called Tailgate.
Yeah, I went to Tailgate and then we went to one down the street.
I can't remember the name of the second one. But those are good because Cesar likes beer. I don't like beer, so it was more for Cesar, obviously, because it was his birthday. But there was one that tasted like was it vanilla?
Oh, yeah. That was interesting.
It tasted like kind of like I guess a cookie or like a s'more. It's kind of the vibe it had. But went to a brewery, and then we went to Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse here in Nashville. And we had some really good steak.
It was great. It was
what
amazing.
would you rate it on like a scale of like 1 to 10? Of like best steak you ever had to like...
I don't know what it was about this steakhouse. Again, don't get me wrong. It was great. It was amazing. See
like,
why.
No, it sucks.
No, it was good. It's just for whatever reason, when we went on my 28th birthday, I think. Maybe it was 28th or 29th birthday. It was the year before. I went to Smith and Walensky's. I don't know what it is. That place. It was dry aged, and this one wasn't.
I don't really like the dry aged that much. I'm not a huge fan of the dry aged, but it is good. I mean, to me, steakhouses, like, I don't know if I can really, maybe I don't have like a sophisticated palate, but I feel like I can't compare them. Like, obviously I know when it's something like tastes good, but like, it's hard to remember like the meal I had at like Smith and Walensky.
It was good.
I will say the one at Smith and Walensky, I did get a bigger cut.
And then you also had a mac and cheese that you liked.
Oh, the mac and cheese was really good. Yeah. And the mashed potatoes. But the mashed potatoes at Jeff Ruby's were pretty good, too.
Yeah, they were.
But I don't think people go there just for the mashed potatoes.
The vibe was also really cool at Jeff Ruby's.
Yeah, I think a good thing that makes a good dining experience is, like, the experience itself and, like, the vibe. I know one of the best places, and honestly one of the best meals, it's not steakhouse, but one of the best meals me and Cesar ever had was in Vegas, off the strip.
Oh, yes.
And it was this place called Sparrow and Wolf. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think me and Cesar were like, they gotta put drugs in this stuff because it was so good. The drinks were so good, and like the menu was like small enough to where they perfected each and every dish. And like you could see, we were sitting at the bar area, you could see the chefs in the kitchen and like directing everything going. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, highly recommend it if you're ever in Vegas.
But me and Cesar finished the meal and we're like, they must put like drugs in this because we felt like it was like euphoric.
Yeah, it was so
there.
good.
So
yeah.
I definitely want to go back there whenever we do go back to visit Vegas. We'll definitely head there. But damn, I'm just hungry. I think that's why we're thinking about food too.
Yeah, I think so.
But we had some friends in town this weekend too. Well, a friend. And so we got to hang out with him and like just, have a good weekend. But now I think Cesar and I have been just kind of trying to play catch up and get ready for this upcoming week, just the work week, because it comes way too fast. This episode, I wanted to talk about relationships and specifically why relationships go bad. And when I say relationships, I don't just mean like relationship that you and I have, but relationship that like you would have with a friend or like your family, and kind of reasons that like there's these issues with relationships and why they maybe turn sour when you would have thought like, oh, like no, this would stay good forever. Does that like make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I thought of this because we have so many different relationships in our lives, and like some of them kind of end without reason or without notice, or like people change, and it's just interesting to see like to really, when you like go back and you look at like a relationship you had with someone, at least I do, I try to pinpoint like where things like fell off or where things went wrong. So, I mean, do you ever do that? Do you ever like think back to like maybe friendships you had, a relationship you had, and like, man, I never predicted it would go this way. So like, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to self-reflect, and look inwards on everything in life, right? So, I mean, again, relationships, whether it's a friendship or someone you truly deeply cared about, and or whatever the case is, even family too as well. Um, take like, hey, what went wrong? Like, what could I have done to do better? And you take that as a learning lesson and apply it to your next friendship or whatever it is that you're wanting to nurture and build. So, but yeah, I do that. I do that a lot. I've done that a lot in the past, and it's a good way to learn and find out how to be a better person.
What would you do though if you evaluate like the relationship and you're just like, I don't see where I went wrong, or like what I could have done to prevent whatever happened?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I imagine if there wasn't enough direct communication between you and whoever that was, friend, whatever, that maybe you would never know what exactly happened. Ghosted, right? Like just what happened. Maybe, basing it off our last podcast, maybe there was something going on with them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we didn't reach out, and we just didn't know what was going on, but we didn't reach out. So, yeah, there's a number of things I think that could you really wouldn't know until you like ask or, yeah. I mean, I would ask. I would start by asking.
Like, hey, like, what did I do wrong? I think that's like a hard thing to do though. Like, say like you have a relationship like that went sour. Is like, how do you ask it? Like, hey, like, what did I do? I think some people wouldn't want to hear the answer to that question. Like, what did I do wrong that made our relationship this way?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot to like own up, especially if you're at fault for something, right? Like you're the one that you did wrong, and I think it's a admirable thing to do to reach out to that person. Let's say if you did something wrong, and tell them, hey, I know, like, let's say it was a year ago. I know a year ago we had a falling out or whatever, and I'm truly sorry, X, Y, Z. And you don't have to forgive me or whatever the case is, but at least it's good for you because you feel, at least it might make you feel better because maybe there was like something that was like digging at you.
It's crazy because when you say that, I think about like, not the selfishness, but like doing things for the right reason. Like, oh, do you reach out and apologize to someone? I often think like, are you genuinely sorry, or are you just trying to clear like your own conscience and you're trying to feel better about yourself because you can say like, oh, well, I did everything that I could,
Yeah,
Sometimes I think about that.
Both,
I often think about that, like where like people's intentions behind, like for instance, apologies or like just any of their actions. Because I mean, obviously, you can't tell other people's intentions. You can only assume, which you also shouldn't do. But sometimes I do wonder, like for instance, in that example, you're saying, oh, you could say sorry and then know, like, you did what you could, and that'll give you a sense of closure, which is good on your part. But like at the same time, is like if you're only doing it because you want to feel better, is that even the right reason? Or like you genuinely sorry for what you did? Do you like genuinely care about like the pain you caused? That kind of thing. I think about that a lot. But anyway, I kind of wanted to talk about like why do you think like relationships that are like essentially really good for you or like are going well end up turning sour? Why do you think that is?
That's a deep conversation.
It's a loaded question. Well, that's what
No,
this
it's a loaded
podcast
question.
is about.
It's because there's a lot.
So like, we'll just start with one thing.
Again, communication. That's like one of the key aspects of any relationship or friendship or whatever the case is. If maybe there's a friend you have that that loves to be communicated to or talked to in a certain way, and maybe one day, we all have different moods, we all have different things going on in our lives, and maybe something's going on with them that you don't know about or whatever the case is, and they just are like, I don't want to talk to you anymore, but don't directly tell you, and then it just there's kind of like a silent falling out,
Yeah, those are the worst. The
silent
falling outs, like,
yeah.
oh, like.
Yeah.
I feel like you've got to make someone really upset though for that to happen. It can't just be a one-time occurrence of like. I think that's the main thing too. Is like, if a relationship in your life went bad, like it's probably not based off of something that happened once. It's probably something that has consistently happened. Because I can't imagine someone just being like, "You did this to me one time, and now it's our friendship or our relationship is over."
It was like a decision.
Unless
point,
it's like cheating, like that's. I will say like cheating.
There's
in a relationship, that probably would be a one-time thing for me.
But then there's like, I'm thinking more of like a, when you're having like, when you have a friendship, a relationship, or whatever it is, if there's like, there was some sort of, again, miscommunication on your behalf, or the other individual, whoever it is, and then it just didn't translate well. Whether you're like, maybe you called them, maybe sometimes it's better to talk to them in person, or like it just triggered them. Like there's a lot of things going on maybe, and that you don't know, and then next thing you know, they're like, hey, like I don't want to like delete my number, or whatever.
But that's what I'm saying, though, is like it wouldn't just be one time. Like,
yeah,
I doubt that like you'd say something to someone that they didn't like, and then it's over.
yeah,
Like it'd have to happen like on multiple occurrences.
yeah. I mean, but then there's some that I know you told me about. You've had friends that you've had before in the past where you were good friends with them, and then like, again, I think it's communication, like some sort of miscommunication on.
I don't think it's
about something.
communication. Like, I mean, communication is a key of it, but like sometimes when I analyze the relationships I had, it wasn't communication. It was like a series of things.
Okay.
Like, because communication is one thing. It's easy. Like, I think it's also like action. So like communication is one thing, but the action that you take and how that action like will make someone perceive you. Like, for instance, like, say if you have a friend who, I had a friend like this in like high school and in middle school, that this friend of mine only wanted to hang out with me to get closer to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to realize that pattern, it's just like, I don't even know what that's called, but it's like messed up. It's like, oh, they only call me when this is happening, or they only call me when it benefits them.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's a shitty like place to be too, because you don't feel like you actually have like a connection with that person. You just feel used. You feel like, oh, I only matter when it's inconvenience to someone else. And ideally, when you have a friendship or any relationship with anybody, you want it to be like a mutual thing where you both care, like ideally an equal amount about each other. Obviously, that's like not realistic to be like, oh, I care this much about you and you care this much about me. But you want to feel like the relationship dynamic is reciprocated. Like, oh, like if I always go out of my way for you, you would want that person to go out of their way for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think like that's something that happens is people take advantage of others, and maybe like, or you just don't realize you just don't appreciate people,
Yeah. It could just be that blindfold ignorance of,
Yeah.
it could be, again, there's so much, like, I resonate really, I just think back to that podcast from last week, or actually 2 weeks ago, and there might be something going on that I just don't know,
But I don't think friendships end, ideally, I don't think friendships should end over that. And I know a lot of people, I posted a clip on TikTok from that podcast last 2 weeks ago, and it went like very viral on TikTok, and half of it was because people were like, you are so selfish, because basically the clip said, when I was going through a lot, I did distance myself from my friends and my family, and a lot of people took my silence and me not wanting to talk to anyone as personal, and people were like, that's selfish, that's gaslighting, you're like mental, like that kind of thing. And while I try to look at things from like that dynamic too, I don't think it's selfish to realize when you need space to figure your life out, because I knew in that case I could present my best self to the people that I loved. Therefore, I didn't want to present a version of myself that might regret my actions to the world, So that was something that people didn't hear in that clip. But I think like, I wouldn't say it ended a lot of relationships in my life. I know for some people it does, but it definitely like made people feel a certain way of like, some family might feel like, why can't you reach out? Why can't you talk? And it's like, it's not as simple as answering like, there's not an answer you can give them that they'll love, So like, but I don't think I personally don't think that should be a reason like relationships. And maybe they do. Maybe people can't respect like when you need space or when you don't want to communicate. I think that was the biggest thing people commented was, you should just communicate that you don't want to talk. And like, that sounds so simple. And like it does, but at the same time, when you're in a space like where you're as down as I was and you just, I don't know, you didn't want to be here, communicating wasn't something you wanted to do because you're already ashamed of your feelings. And then you're going to get questions, well, why? Or, depending on who, some people just won't respect it and they'll ask questions, well, why? Why can't you talk to me? So it's like, you just don't want to go through all of that. But anyway, I digress. That was last week. And like on that podcast clip, people genuinely were like, this is psychotic. And I'm like, I didn't really think it was. And I had a therapist react to that specific clip that validated, like, I wasn't crazy for thinking that it's like, yeah, don't take it personally. And I think it's funny because I saw a clip, too, from a couple that are married that, like, not to take certain things personally in a relationship. So I will say I think that that's something that might be why relationships do go bad, too, is because you take things too personally. Would you say, like, maybe that's something?
I mean, I guess when someone says that, don't take things too personally. Do you mean like a critique? If someone said, "Hey, I think you can be better," and like things like that, and then they give you advice, and then you take it like as a personal attack or something like that? Is that what you mean?
Well, something like that, or like, for instance, like me and you, in the beginning of our relationship, well, not the beginning, we were dating for a couple of months, and I showed you something I had worked on for school,
yeah.
And you were like, Sonny, this is not good. You're like, that sucks. And I was like, I took it very personal because I was like, this is someone I love and I care about who said this thing to me about something I worked on. And like in your mind, the way you saw it, because you've explained this to me, is that you just knew I could do better. And that's what you were trying to convey. Mm-hmm. So I think we take things personally. Or like, for instance, like we were cleaning this morning and I was vacuuming and there's like those vacuum
the filters,
yeah. And you're like, oh, we have to clean these. And I was like, oh, don't clean it until I finish vacuuming because then I would have to wait to vacuum. And you were like, okay. And then you cleaned them anyway. Mm-hmm. If I would have just like, I kind of did take that personally though too. I took it personally because it felt like, I was like, you don't listen to me. You didn't listen. So like that was something I was like, oh, he just does this and like, I'm the only one he does this with. Like, that's how it kind of feels,
Yeah, no.
But, like, I feel like if you do that too much in a relationship, it will kind of just break it down because I think some things aren't as personal. It's not about you. It's just, like, maybe it's just something you have a habit of doing. Or maybe it's just, like, it's just it's not because of you, I guess,
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel that there are certain situations that people go through in life or certain relationships that people go through in life where if they feel like they can't voice their thoughts out in a certain manner, then obviously sooner or later, if that person doesn't realize that this is the way they communicate with them, obviously, of course, there's better ways. You should always try to find better ways to communicate with those people that are around you, and not just fall back on, well, this is the way I've always been. It's a very common thing people say. But it's a way for you to grow, especially if you want to be with that person, like long term. It's different if you don't. If you're just like, you know what, I want to find someone or I want to be around people that understand me for who I am and not wanting to like, quote unquote change, but maybe it's for the better, when you look at it.
That's kind of conflicting though too, is because there's that in a relationship, you want someone to like love you unconditionally for your flaws, which I think isn't like a horrible ask, but there's also that like concept of I'm just who I am who I am, and there's like no changing me, and how dare you want to change me. And I think that does happen a lot in a relationship, is where like someone wants to change a certain aspect of their partner, but it may not be like awful to say like, hey, this is something you should work on, because like depending on what it is, we all need to grow as people. So it's conflicting to think that like, you need to love someone for who they are, which you can. So you can love them as this person who who like maybe needs to grow, but also want the best and like kind of try to voice that. And like that might make someone feel like, why don't you just love me the way I am? Why do you want me to change? That's kind of like conflicting, I feel like, in the mind of like, at least that's how I see it, is like, yeah. That's what
No,
I
I
think
mean,
of.
it can be conflicting. It can be difficult, especially because the thing is, it's really hard. I mean, if you tell anyone who's been, I mean, you get this a lot. I mean, I'm pretty sure if a random stranger went up to you who has no idea who you are, nothing, and just says, "Hey, you," and points at you and says, "You need to do X, Y, Z," you're going to take it personal because first of all, it's like you're just some random person in the street. I have no idea who you are. Like you don't
Or
know
on
who
the
I am,
contrary, you
or
might not because they're a random person. I feel like you take things more personally when it comes from someone that you care about their opinion.
oh no, I mean obviously there's that, but what I was trying to say with that is that you again see that or hear that from that person on the street or whoever it is, and you immediately goes into your mind and you're like, wait, you don't even know who I am. So either you can take that comment personally, and a lot of people do take comments like that from random people on the street personally, and then they get in fights, and you see all these world star videos on the internet because people take comments from belligerent people on the street, and then they're like, "What'd you say?" And then they get in a fight. And so that's what I'm saying is there's people that do take those things personally, and that you shouldn't, especially from someone who doesn't know you. If it is someone, if someone is giving you, if someone is critiquing something about you, and it's coming from a place of, "Hey, I want you to succeed, and this is why I think you should look into X, Y, Z, look into this thing or do this thing or whatever it is," I think you should listen, and not take it in a negative aspect. Obviously, as long as they're not telling you to do something horribly bad, like I think you need to go and give me $1,000 if you love me or something like that, right? It's one of those things where it comes from it has to come from a good place, and we
I
all
think
have.
it's hard to determine though, like whether it's coming from a great
Well,
place,
that's what I was gonna say.
especially if
Yeah,
like in your relationship, like I don't know, it could also maybe stem from like not feeling like super secure in your relationship, and like if someone says that, like if you're with someone and they make that critique, it might be more of a reflection of you than it is like what they're actually saying.
yeah,
I know like a lot of times in my life it is because like maybe like you're critiquing that I'm insecure about, and like I can acknowledge like what I'm insecure about, but when someone else brings it up, it's just like it's like you don't want that person to see that. Like say if you were to say like I don't know, but if you criticized me or not criticized but critiqued me on something that I was already knowing that like I need to work on, um it kind of puts you in a vulnerable place because then you realize this person that I love like sees me, like really sees me, and that's kind of scary of having someone like see those ugly sides of you, because you wonder like how long are they going to stick around, or is this when it's over, like if I don't change, like is it over now? So I think it's
yeah,
hard because we're probably insecure about some of the things we do need to change about ourselves. But the one thing too I wanted to bring up too is like why relationships go bad is I think the expectations that we set for them. I know like when I was in high school, I was very much a hopeless romantic, and I just had this vision of what my relationship will look like, and that just sets you up for failure. Because for one, you're looking for like a nearly impossible guy to find. You're also kind of predicting how the relationship should play out, but you just can't predict anything in life. So it's kind of silly to even have that in general. But also just like when you're finally in a relationship, like expecting, you just got to be careful with what you expect from someone else,
yeah,
especially like I can't expect you to fix all my problems, right?
yeah.
Because that's not fair of me to be like this person is going to fix everything in my life. That's a lot of pressure to put on another person. But I think often people put a lot of pressure on who they're with. Maybe it's someone like an actual relationship like ours or like a friendship, and that can then when you put all that pressure and that person fails you, you're obviously upset, but you've kind of set yourself up to be upset because that person can't meet your expectations. It's not to say you should lower your expectations in like the sense that like just accept shittiness, but like have realistic expectations for the people around you. Like think to yourself, like, would I hold myself to this? And even if you would hold yourself to this, like you got to give people grace, and I don't think we do that a lot.
I mean, there's certain things that I think we should all expect from one another. But there are, again, you can put unrealistic expectations on someone, And that could lead to, again, not talking about relationships in this podcast, that could lead to someone being like, peace, like.
It could just mean like the relationship doesn't continue because you guys don't have like the same idea of what like friendship should be or like what a relationship should be.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be something, again, unrealistic, it could be something outrageous that they're requesting. Again, like I mentioned earlier, like, you don't, if you really care about me, you need to give me $1,000, or you need to let me borrow your car, or you need to do XYZ, like something really crazy that you're like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like every day you have to have dinner ready when I get home.
Or like every day you have to, like certain things, there's a number of things, But for some, maybe that's the type of relationship they want to be in. And there's people that live in those types of relationships.
No, so. They do. And that's the thing. It's like, it's really a case-by-case basis. But I think often, like, I guess we don't really think about, like, what we expect of people. And I know that I've been in the position where, because I'm one way, like, I can't understand why someone wouldn't reciprocate what I do. But it's all about, we're all different people. So I love to give gifts to my friends and like show them I care. Like that's one thing I've always done. But I can't expect my friends to do the same thing because they're different people and they might show appreciation differently. Mm-hmm. So like I think we get messed up too because we might be that type of person that always shows up, always like is the like ear to listen and just this what we feel like an all-around great friend. And when we're not reciprocated, you may have that intention of like, well, you may feel that your friends aren't great friends because they're not doing the same thing that you're doing, but you're not looking at, well, how do they show their appreciation to you? And like they might show it a different way. It's not that they don't care, but you can't expect them to act in the same way that you do.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've been in that situation where like I have really great friends, but we definitely just are different in how we show that we care. Like some friends I don't talk to, like I talk maybe once a month because that's how our lives get busy and we both understand that. But others you might have like that want to hear from you more often to know that you care, and like you kind of gotta like navigate that with whatever relationship it is. So I think that's one thing. The other thing, like this is specifically in like relationships, not friendships, but like a relationship like ours, is having like, what was it? It's called, sorry. Oh, unlinked futures.
Unlinked futures. What
so like your idea of the future is different from my idea. Or like when I put this down because I think we dealt with this when we were like 8 months in and we were doing long distance. And I started to really get upset with the fact that you were living one life in Vegas and I was living like one life in Tallahassee. And it felt like our lives were so different. And it kind of sucked because I felt like we didn't have that connection of like both understanding like each other's lives at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I would honestly say, yeah, that was the case. You were going to college at the time and I was working and building out these really cool things that I learned a lot from, looking back at it even today, even like right now. And we were doing our own thing, but we were obviously, again, separated by distance, right? Because it was a long distance relationship. So looking back at it now and on the subject of, unrealistic expectations, wasn't that kind of like unrealistic? Like,
I don't think it was unrealistic in the sense that it was unrealistic for our relationship because we couldn't be in the same place. But at the same time, I thought that it meant that like I just needed someone that like
because you wanted to do all these
fits the mold of like being here and like someone that will have a similar life that I do and like understand like the other thing is that I felt that one day like me and you would get married, but the story we tell our kids is like our lives when you were in your 20s and my life in my 20s would be such different stories and they wouldn't be connected. And I feel like when you like think about love and marriage, you think about how the people were very connected to each other and their lives were very intertwined. So I think I just felt like our lives weren't very intertwined. And now I realize they didn't need to be. Like, it's okay to have, like, very separate lives, especially when you're apart like that. But I think I also wanted to feel like we were each a part of them. Like, I wanted you to, like, know my friends and love my friends and, like, have a chance to meet them and stuff and, like, hang out with us. And, like, the same goes, like, for me to, like, meet your friends and hang out with your friends, which was hard to do because we were doing long distance. And then the other thing was we weren't planning for the future. Like, we would talk about it. Like, I think we really much were, like, serious about each other. But, like, for instance, even when we were dating, we never knew the next time we were going to see each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that led us to break up because I was really upset because I'm like, we just never know when we're going to see each other because we weren't planning out trips. And, like, in my mind, too, I think, like, when I look back at it, the reason I, like, was so upset about that is because it felt like you didn't want to go out of your way to see me.
Mm.
And I was just like, well, if he doesn't even want to plan to come see me, like, and I'm going to see him, like, or I want to see him at least, like, what the heck? And I felt like, too, I was like, you know, I'm in college, so you need to come see me because, like, I have a very, like, particular schedule. So I think it just felt like we weren't really planning in advance, and that didn't feel good because you want, like, to think. You want to include that person in your plan for life,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like, think about them. Like, for instance, if you were going to take a vacation, you would probably want to talk to me about it. Like, at that point, I would have wanted you to talk to me about it because maybe, like, if you're going to take a vacation, come see me, or, like, can we see each other? Like, because you're going to have time off. Like, that kind of thing. You just want to be included in, like, that future, you know? Because otherwise, what's it all for?
Again, yeah, unlinked. What was it called?
Unlinked futures.
Unlinked future. And I would honestly say, yeah, we were unlinked. I had a different idea for what I wanted out of my life at the time.
Yeah.
And you did too.
Well, I knew what I wanted.
No,
I wanted my future to be with you.
I did too as well, but mine was different. Of course I wanted to be with you, but there was, I guess I would even say, maybe there was those unrealistic expectations, like
unreal expectations of asking you to want to come see me.
No, I mean, there was that, but obviously, again, there was a number of factors that led to that. Looking back at it now,
Yeah.
But obviously, we found our way back because we're here.
Yeah.
But yeah. There's a lot.
But
there.
I think if we wouldn't have communicated, because I think the one thing we did when we did get back together, because we were only broken out for like a month and a half, and when we got back together, we were very clear with what we both needed.
Yeah.
And my thing was, I need to know when I'm gonna see you next, and I need to know, like, what are we gonna do? Like, I was gonna graduate too, and I needed to know, like, what's after graduation gonna look like. And I know, like, we had to have those plans, because otherwise you felt like you were, like, in this relationship, but what was it for and what was it leading to? It's like it's going after something you have no idea of, like, of what happens next, and, like, that kind of sucks. I think the other thing, though, like outside of our situation, I think people, when you think about unlinked futures, it's like there needs to be that kind of agreement between, like, for instance, even like your job. It's like, if you want someone that's going to be around all the time, probably not great if they have a job that requires them to travel all the time. So it's crazy to think how even those things can affect your relationship, like where you work and, like, what you do for a living, because, you know, some people are okay with, like, their husbands being gone all the time because, like,
or vice versa too.
Yeah. Or, like, just needing to travel where other people, like, aren't. So, like, those are things, obviously, like, if you get married, those are things probably that you figure out before you ever get married. But that's probably too, like, not discussing that of, like, what that looks like can lead to those relationships going bad. The other thing that I thought was, like, this came up a lot when I was reading into this subject was money.
Mm-hmm.
Money is, like, the root of all evil, as they say, when it comes to, like, I feel like any type of relationship. I know, like, some people, I've met people, and I'm this way too, like, I love and I care about my friends, but having your friends borrow money for you is a very uncomfy feeling to have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of people be like, oh no, I'm sorry, I won't lend.
That's the boundary that they set, which I think is a good idea.
No, it is, because, like, you can, and some people might feel like, oh, you don't trust me, or, like, but it is a boundary of, like, hey, I'm not gonna lend you money because I don't want to ruin our relationship. Or when I was in high school, one of my high school teachers, when we were all going off to college, was like, don't live with your friends because you won't be friends after. They're like, you might love the person that you hang out with all the time, but you might not want to live with them. So he always suggested that people don't live with their best friends because they wouldn't be friends after.
That's some good advice.
And I think it's funny too because I can see like where that happens. Like when I was in college and I was living with Issa and Sierra, and I love them, but I think we all would get on each other's nerves sometimes because it was like either like one of us didn't do dishes, or like, you know, you just like, you want to love your friends for them and like not have to like, not have to deal with like their not so great habits, but some people like that can really tear them up. Like, man, I didn't know this person was this messy, or like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's funny is that too. But yeah, the money thing is like huge. I saw that like, man, I probably shouldn't say this. I know like in my parents' relationship, that was like huge, like arguments about money.
If you're going to, you know, travel, for example, to go visit someone who you care about, whether it's like your friends or whatever, or in this case, like a relationship, obviously that's going to be a factor in whether you're going to go or not, or whether you can go or not. And then there's like, especially if money's tight and you're, and there's this expectation of, oh, well, you need to plan X, Y, Z, or whatever it is. You're like, well, I don't have money for that right now, you know? And yeah, there's like that sort of thing. So that can lead to setting an unrealistic expectation for someone who can't afford to do what you ideally would want someone to do or want them to give you, you know?
Yeah. I feel like all of the things kind of like interconnect with each other.
They do.
But like I think too with money is I know I've seen, for instance, I watched this podcast called Too Hot Taste, and some of the stories are about like one of the stories was about like me and my husband split bills evenly, but technically it doesn't make sense that they split bills evenly because her husband makes more. So therefore, like given like the like more, because he makes more, he should have to pay more, because it doesn't make sense like to.
That's interesting. I mean, that's interesting that
some people feel like, I'm not saying like I feel this way. I mean, me and you just share a bank account, so it's kind of, but some people are really like, no, I don't want to share my money. And I think that could be like that could be for some people like where it goes sour because they have a certain like, oh, like things need to be 50-50, or I just don't want to share a bank account. Like some people I guess are really against shared bank accounts, and I'm like your money's, I was going to say your money's my money, but like we share like our stuff. So like my money's your money's my money. Like we don't like.
Does she really think that? No.
No, I do. Like, you know, we pay for like all of it goes into one account, so it's all like up for you to use or up for me to use.
I mean, ideally, yes, but you know, depending on the situation, what's going on, we all realize like, you know, we have to make sure we have a roof over our head, bills are paid, things like that. So,
but some people won't even have like a shared account. Like some people are just like are really against like, no, I want what's mine to be mine, and like that can be like where the relationship is.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously that, but then I mean, there's also like, you know, for example, you let me borrow your car, that's your car, right?
I would say, but that was really hard for me.
Where obviously you're paying for it. I'm not paying for it. I'm not, and the money is coming out of, I guess, our account in this case. But for that car note, right? But yeah, because it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. Like when we met, it wasn't like a thing I would ever think about. Like, oh, I'm going to help you get a car. It was one of those things where I was just like, oh, I'll help you out because I know you need a car, and your other car was like breaking down.
Yeah.
So I know for some it's like, no, you're gonna have to figure it out yourself. You know, call your parents or find a friend.
But this wasn't. You know. Wait, did you? I was gonna say, but this was. I was gonna say this was before. This was before we were engaged too.
Yeah.
So you really did take a risk.
Well, no, because this is one of those things where it can often be blurry, or you forget how often people who truly show that they care about you I knew I was going to be with you, and I was committed, so I knew like this is going to, I need for her to have a car because you need to go to work.
Well, yeah, and I also moved across country. At least you could.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying it's like, yeah, there's those things like, you know, you have your car. I currently don't have a car, so I'm having to borrow your car. You know, yeah, so it's just, some people would find that interesting. They're like, wait,
Yeah.
what do you mean that it's her car, but then you share finances, and then he helped you get the car because you co-signed or whatever the case is. So how does
I
that make
pay
sense?
it.
I know. That's what I'm saying is you pay it at the end of the day, and I understand it's your car, even though both of our names are on it. It's
So here's
interesting.
the thing.
It's
Here's the
interesting.
thing, though, is like Caesar knows that I'm this way too, and this is a little off topic. I will share most things, but coming from like someone who grew up having to share everything with my sister because we were twins, like she would steal my clothes or like we had a shared car. My car, like really any nice thing I have, I'm really protective of. So like when Caesar had to like start borrowing my car, I was just like very upset in the sense that like it was something that was mine that I was paying for and that like, you know, for one I'm wondering like if anything happens to it, like I'd be like we'd be screwed and like
Yeah, exactly.
so like I think about that stuff and then yeah. I'm just really possessive over something.
No, and I get
like,
that,
my
and I
car is like
understand
one
that,
thing,
yeah.
and so
I'm fully aware of that, which is why I'm again. If I really did care about it, and I was someone again, because this could be.
I mean, some people
for
might be
some-
like, no, like this needs to be ours, or like you're
Or
freaking
we're-
crazy, or we're done.
Or like, that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
like I see in your notes here, like red flag. For some, it's like, oh, that's like a red flag for me. If you know, I'm not saying that it is for me. I'm just saying people would say like that's a red flag if this person is there's like a term for it, like obsessive compulsive. I don't know. That's the
I'm not obsessive. No,
no. That's
it's
probably
just-
not it. That's not the right
I'm
term, but it's something like that.
It's not protective, but like I just like what's mine, and like it goes like the thing is I feel like you can understand it because I explained to you like why I'm like that because I haven't had a lot of things that were mine, just mine, and like it's for one it's usually with expensive items. Like if you I'm not gonna be upset if I buy food and you eat it because that's like something I can like replace easily. But with the car, like that was something that like in my mind I'm like okay I've worked really hard for this and like obviously you did co-sign it but like at the same time I was like well I'm gonna be making the payment so it was merely just so I could make sure I got the car. Anyway, but yeah, I know some people would think it's weird when I say like, oh, it's my car and it's not like our car because it like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just really weird about like that kind of stuff.
No, and I
'Cause just
understand that, and I
really
get it.
want like,
Yeah.
I like having like it's okay. So it's a sense of identity thing, I think, because like you want stuff that's like mine. Like we wouldn't want to share everything, right? Like for instance, like we both have a camera, and like. I would like if you said, "Hey, I want to sell my camera and just use yours," I'd be mad because.
Or if I wanted to use my camera for this podcast, you'd be mad.
Well, because I like my camera.
Isn't this our podcast?
It is, but I like the camera that we use. So like, but that's another thing that's like a sense of like having a sense of like your own stuff is important to me.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
while we share like our finances, having a sense of like I own this and this is mine and like I'm in charge of like keeping this safe. That's the thing. It's like with my camera, like even when like you would use it, I get nervous because I'm like, I no longer have control of like making sure nothing happens to it. You know? And obviously I don't want anything bad to happen to you in my car either. So like I'm also a really anxious person. So yeah. If it were me, I would just have you bubble wrapped in you know, but yeah, but for some people that would be a deal breaker. Like, why are you so possessive?
Yeah, just being possessive.
Possessive over things. And like granted I try to be better about it. Like I try not to like I have tried working on that. But there's always gonna be things that I want that are just mine. Whereas Caesar's very very much like, oh yeah, you can use this, you can take this. Caesar would like let someone borrow his things that like he didn't even know.
I was always that type of person to try to lend a helping hand. Like, oh yeah. I mean, especially if it's like my camera or my computer, I'd probably want to make sure I'm like within eyes distance of it.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But
Or it was with someone you trusted.
yeah, or I trust them. You know, I'd trust you with my camera and stuff. I wouldn't worry about it. Like I wouldn't bat an eye, like and stuff. But I understand. I get it.
But I think though too, like we would have different reactions of like say something like say you did give me your camera and something happened to it, I don't think your reaction would be anger, whereas mine would.
Yeah, I mean, I would just be like,
You would just be like, oh, well it happens.
It was an accident. I don't have it's an old camera, so I don't know.
But like that's where you and I differ. And I think the thing is like this is kind of off topic too. I think the reason our relationship works is because we are opposites, and like sometimes the oppositeness of us is what like creates a good healthy balance. And like I have not good qualities that you don't have, but like I see things differently, so I can offer a certain perspective to you, and you see things differently and you can offer a certain perspective to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like if we were both like the same person, it wouldn't work either, because like you need that kind of like balance, like where you're not just dating yourself. I would not want to date me.
That's funny. Yeah, that's funny.
But yeah, so I think that would be like something that like kind of that would like maybe turn people off and be like, yeah, this is not a relationship I want to be in. One last thing I want to mention too is something I saw on TikTok. There's this girl who has a podcast. I think it's called Elephants in the Room. And she had a clip on TikTok that I saw that was like talking about how she'd been in a toxic relationship before, and now she was in a healthy one, and they go to couples therapy. And basically, the therapist was like, "You're gonna disappoint each other." And she was like, "What do you mean?" Like, no, like he's really good to me. Like, but it's like at any point in your relationship, no matter how great it is, you're gonna disappoint each other. And I think that's where people think if like their relationship is perfectly healthy, that it'll be just signs and rainbows. But a healthy relationship is also one that has like like we argue. I would say like fighting, like fist fighting, but it's one that like has like layers, and there will be times where like not that our needs aren't met, but like we disappoint each other. Like, you know, you might let someone down because we can't be perfect 100% of the time. And I say this all the time because, yeah, I can't expect you to be, like, on your A game every day. Like, you know, or, like, I can't expect you to anticipate my every need, you know, especially if we don't communicate with each other. So I think, like, if you're, like, feeling like, oh, like, the person I, like, am with, or even, like, in a friendship, that this person has disappointed you, it's like, well, for one, you got to think about the consistency of it. It's like, are they always disappointing you, or is it just like every now and then? And if it's just every now and then, it's like, well, that's kind of normal. You know, you can't expect someone to like be 100% of the time. So that like you have to reflect on like, is it really happening all the time? Because for instance, every day if like you were doing the same thing I asked you not to do, well, yeah, that'd be pretty upsetting, and that would probably be the end of our relationship. But if you're just doing it like, and you're like, shit, sorry, I forgot that you don't like that, or like, shit, it's like, you know, we shouldn't like get upset with like someone that we love for like, you know, letting us down once or twice.
Yeah.
It's really about patterns and trends of like how often are they letting you down, or like, you know, I think that's like, I don't think like when we talk about like relationships going bad, or like, you know, friendships going bad, or, you know, relationships we have with family members going bad, I don't think it's necessarily all that bad to like lose people. Like, you know,
I don't think it's bad, nor is it good to lose someone who you had a relationship, friendship with, because it's a learning experience, right? I do think it can be bad. And I guess it depends on what happened in that relationship or friendship or family, if it's something to do with family. Because, I mean, a lot of people, I always think of like, like what do you call it? Family. Like Fast and the Furious, like family is everything. And for some, it really is everything. I really do think family is everything. I do think that there's a lot of important things if you're lucky to have like a mom and dad, or be born in a household with, you know, loving parents, you know. So it's some people don't. They're not born with. They're not born into a family that's like that. But when you come to appreciate all the little things that they gave you or didn't give you because of, you know, a lesson, or didn't have enough money, or whatever it was. So like losing that's like, that can be detrimental. Like it can, it could be damaging, and like in ways that people can often forget about it and not really think about it much. But that's where I think it could be like, bad. It could be bad for that person. I've seen this stuff on TikTok too, where they're like, oh, this person's too much with their family. I'm not a family person. Like there's girls or women that are like, he's too much of a family man. Like he's too connected with his family. I'm not that type of person. So that's like a red flag.
I think this
for
all
me.
boils down to though is like being understanding each other's background, and then also like, okay, because like I'm just bringing this up, like I didn't grow up the same way you did. Like that's a fact. For one, like I didn't grow up with my dad in the house a lot. Like he worked in another state, so I only saw him like 3 times a year. So I grew up mainly around my mom. I didn't grow up where I had like family around me because we lived in Florida, and the only family member was my uncle, and he lived like 2 hours away. So like I didn't grow up being surrounded by a lot of family. So like, or necessarily hearing from anyone either in my family. So I wasn't used to that either. I think I can admit, like when I moved to Vegas and we were around your family a lot, it made me very uncomfortable because I wasn't used to being around a lot of people all the time. Also, I don't come from a very huggy, touchy type feely type of family. So like having to say hello to everyone, or like some people think that's just manners. I don't think it is. I think it's like if you don't know people, you don't feel comfortable walking up and saying hi. And then like also hugging people, that's like personal space thing of like, I don't like normally hug a lot of people. Like I have friends that I've been friends with for years that I don't hug when I see them. Like we just don't. It's like Laura. Like me and Laura don't hug. Like we would hang out all the time. Don't think I've ever hugged her. So like that was something that was very different for me. But at the same time, it's like me and you have an understanding of like of that. I feel like like my family background, so I feel like we kind of have an understanding of that. Like, and I don't expect you not to be with your family,
Mm-hmm. I mean, now we're extremely far away.
Now we're far, but that's because of your job.
Yeah.
But I think when people say like, oh, like he's too much of a family man, the way I see things too, like for instance, like one day when we have kids too, like I love my family, but at the same time we're building our own lives,
Mm-hmm.
So like we need time to like build that. And I know like when we were in Vegas, like your mom would ask like every weekend to do something, and like I don't have a social battery for that, like to do like and go out. Like even now we just sit at home a lot of the time. Like it's not that we'll go out. Like when we went out for your birthday, the next day I was exhausted. I was like, damn, I don't think we can do anything today.
Yeah, I know.
So I think that like some people might just be like, I want to make sure that we have time to focus on the family like we're also building.
Mm-hmm.
I
think that's admirable. That's reasonable. I think that's important. Again, it gets to the point where you have to leave to go do your thing with someone else. To branch off and start your own family.
Yeah, isn't there a quote about that? Like, like for instance, when you get married, you two become one, and you're making your own family.
No, exactly. And that's, again, extremely important in society and life. And it's just more on like, again, like I've heard and seen people, like, especially on TikTok, like, I mean, you broke up with this person because he had a good family growing up? Like, that makes no sense at all. Like, and he had good moral values or whatever it was that held them together, and he wanted that with somebody else.
Well, you'd be surprised though, like the information
no
behind some of that is like maybe that like there are people who did, you grew up really, like guys for instance, grew up really close with their mom. That can end up like biting someone in the butt because like sometimes the mom doesn't have boundaries, or like mothers will like be that type of mother, like no one's good enough for my son, and
which
like,
I think is, I mean, that's a good thing. It's good to have
good
expectations for
a lot of times they end up being a horrible mother-in-law to their future, like their daughter-in-law. Like mm-hmm. That's where I hear a lot of stories where like
I've heard stuff
people
like that.
People are like, he was his mom like just is like, I don't know how to say it. There's just, I feel like there's more to those stories where it's like not
There
just that he
probably
was
is,
close
yeah.
with his family, but like
You
it's
only got
just
60
like,
seconds or whatever to tell.
yeah.
There's a lot that can
But
be
that's a good
misconstrued.
point though. Is like you do have to understand people's like family dynamics in a relationship of like knowing like, yeah, just knowing how his family is and like not necessarily comparing it to yours, but like kind of making those adjustments. And those were hard for me because I'm not used to, my family's just different. Like it's not to say that we don't love each other. My family loves each other. It's just that we didn't show love that way. And we also weren't around each other all the time. So like, yeah. And yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just really different. There's a lot of conversations to be had though. I mean, me and Cesar's whole like background is quite complicated.
Yeah.
So especially just in regards to this conversation and like both of our families. So it's very interesting. But yeah, I just think it's interesting the way that like relationships kind of ebb and flow in our lives. And when we look back, like why did certain relationships turn sour? What part did we play in it? And like, you know, what we didn't go over is like what you can do. But I think that there's just like, you got to be cognizant of like all the relationships you have and like the part that you play in them. I don't think we often think about the part we play in others' lives. But we do. You know, what we do affects other people. Yep. You know, like especially like obviously like me and you, like what I do affects you because we live together. Or like, you know, right now what I do might not affect, or for instance, if I went and murdered someone, I'm not going to, by the way. But if I did, hypothetically, don't kill me, Mr. FBI man, that would probably break my family's heart. They'd be like, what? Sonny? Not Sonny. And, like, that would hurt them. So, like, that would, like, while it didn't do anything to them particularly, what my actions hurt them. And I think we have to think about that, too, which is kind of ironic, too, because the post that we clipped for last week's episode, or 2 weeks ago, the episode about, like, me going silent, people were like, you have to think about your actions. And, like, being silent is an action in itself. So a lot of things.
It's a very nuanced thing. That I think is what was very nuanced. And again, it was just a TikTok that was 60 seconds. If they wanted to,
it wasn't even 60 seconds
or less than that. I mean, I'm just saying 60 seconds because you know TikToks. There's a lot that can be misconstrued.
I'm still getting comments where people are like, "You are so selfish," and I'm like, "Dude, like, I'm the type of person that if I can't present my best self to someone, I don't want to present it at all." Because, like, I know that, like, I won't do the right thing if I'm not in the right headspace. And, like, I don't think you should ask someone to, but who knows? I feel like this episode's been kind of jumbled, but that's okay. Yeah. But I think it's also just important to evaluate the relationships you currently have and, you know, how are you nurturing them and how are you... Just how are you participating in them and like how can you be a better person? Because I know like I'm not perfect, and even all of my friendship, sometimes I forget to text back, sometimes I don't reach out when I know I probably should, or you know our lives get busy and like we'll make excuses for ourselves. That's like why we're not being there for someone else or why we're not doing something. That was weird.
House creaking.
But yeah, so yeah, it's been this week's episode. Yeah, anything else, Cesar? Anything else on your mind?
Besides these mics falling, sorry if you keep hearing creaking in the
audio.
audio.
So annoying.
We accidentally broke them on the trip here. Yeah, these are. I would not.
Cesar did. Cesar packaged them.
You broke one. I broke one. Remember, you broke one setting this up, and then I broke one.
Well, we don't know if it was already broken, and I just kind of put the final touches on it.
Either way, I would not recommend these.
We might be holding these mics next week.
I would not recommend these for podcasting because they're really janky when it comes to like having to adjust them. And I think we broke them. We over tightened them, and then anyways, besides that, I think that there are a lot of nuanced conversations that you can have, or not nuanced like situations that are different. You know, again, we're just talking about either our relationships or things we've heard or whatnot that get us to talk and open up about like when a relationship goes bad.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Well, that's it for this episode. If you've listened to the end, we greatly appreciate you. I think this episode is a little bit longer than normal. Honestly, I feel like we're trying to cut them down, but me and Cesar then end up just talking a lot, and I'm like, But please subscribe if you haven't. We're actually at 135 subscribers on YouTube, and we actually have 135 videos posted, including like our shorts that we do. So, yeah, we're moving on up. We're very happy to be here. Happy you're here. We will be back with another episode next Monday. That has been Growing Together with me, Sonny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
We hope you have a great week. We hope you enjoyed listening, and we'll see you again next week.
See you guys later.